Hi everyone, it's Syrian Girl. I am here with Seattle for Truth. I am interviewing him about Gamergate because he's recently created the documentary that has gone viral. And for those of you who haven't seen my previous videos on Gamergate, it's this scandal that has been rocking the video game world, where journalists were discovered to be colluding with certain industry groups to basically use video games for propaganda and re-education purposes. However, not everyone was convinced of this aspect because there wasn't a lot of evidence to support it. But now, with Seattle for Truth documentary, he brings forth 3 hours worth of evidence in the least. Thank you for joining us, Seattle for Truth.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a big fan of yours for quite a while.
Oh, that's very kind of you. One of the first things you mentioned in your documentary is how the Defense Intelligence Agency is sort of linked to pushing for video games to be used for propaganda.
Well, I'm not sure if all your viewers even know exactly who the Defense Intelligence Agency is, because it's one of those alphabet agencies that you don't exactly hear about too often. But the Defense Intelligence Agency is basically our equivalent of the KGB. They're the military espionage, the subversion and propaganda arm of the Department of Defense. And they're under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense as opposed to the CIA. So they're their own distinct division within the military, and they're the ones that have authored one of the major reports that foundational to the documentary.
So this report, they commissioned it from an education organization, is that right? Is that why?
Yeah, they commissioned an educational, probably the premier educational think tank in the country. That's actually, it was established by Congress, and it's the National Academies.
And what was the commission about? What was the report supposed to research? Well, like, what was it about?
Well, it covered a variety of topics, but the primary focus seemed to be about the use of these serious games for propaganda and indoctrination and political subversion purposes. It basically these extra illusory goals. It's what Eric Gordon calls it. And it's what they call propaganda.
Right. They always have names that basically cover up what's blatant, and we're going to get to that, I'm sure, in the rest of our interview, point out a lot of these words that they're using. But this report actually came out with something very interesting. I read from your documentary. They basically said that the biggest obstacle to using video games as propaganda is that the industry itself would be opposed.
Yeah, that was actually the 2010 report that was commissioned by the Defense Intelligence Agency, and one of the guys that was on the committee that authored the report, Michael Zaida, says that the vice president of Electronics Arts at the time in 2005 emailed him and said that he was scared of making these serious games, these games that weren't focused on being fun, because he was scared of a shareholder lawsuit or from retribution from the core gamer demographic.
So basically that just means that the industry doesn't want to make games that gamers don't like because gamers will not buy them.
Exactly. Well, they were scared of making games that weren't fun because they might get sued by their shareholders. That's what they were scared of, or they might get harassed and attacked and made fun of by there might be a big backlash by gamers. And it turns out they were right, because that's what happened with Gamergate. It was a huge backlash, and they weren't sued by shareholders, but I mean, they definitely didn't want to deal with what they've had to deal with.
This backlash actually clued a lot of people up on the collusion that's happening. One of the things that sparked off this movement of gamers is these articles that came out that were telling the industry to no longer make video games with gamers in mind. and most of them were headlined "Gamers are Dead." It led to suspicion of collusion between these game journal websites and journalists. And in fact, this collusion has become proven, isn't that right?
That's one of the catalyzing events that created Gamergate. Was that, well, there was, like you said, there was this list of a dozen or so "Gamers are Dead" articles that came out within a span of a couple of days, and so we thought there was this collusion, and that was confirmed when the Games Journal Pro list was leaked, and it was this list of 150 news journalists for various websites, gaming and tech websites, that were confirmed to be in this special email list that we found out later. It was admitted that that was created by this man in 2010, an Ars Technica journalist named Kyle Orland. And we found that he has some family connections that are quite interesting in relation to the educational reform industry.
So it's interesting that, as you say, the guy who's basically controlling and puppeting all of these journalists, Kyle Orland. From your documentary, we hear that his father got a big grant from the Gates Foundation, the Bill Gates Foundation. And the significance of that is that the Bill Gates Foundation is one of the other groups that are really pushing for this education reform. One of these journals that wrote the articles "Gamers are Dead" were also receiving venture capital backing from the Providence Equity Partners, and they are basically a company that invests in education, and they have recently invested in a company called Blackboard Inc. that makes education software. So the people who have bought these journalists out to write stories, to make the games industry create educational games, are this Providence Equity Partners and the Gates Foundation. Could you tell us more about the Gates Foundation?
Well, the Gates Foundation is widely known that they're the biggest revolutionary in educational reform there is today. They've been the biggest backer of Common Core. It's been said, well, Gates himself has said that he's spent $5 billion in educational reform. And then we have these podcasts from Karina Wong from the Gates Foundation, and she's their head educational representative. She's the one in charge of all the grants that goes out into spurring educational reform. And she's makes all these claims about how she's trying to use games for to replace assessment, to replace standardized testing, just for other forms, to basically start using games as a primary tool in education, not just edutainment games that we've seen in the past like Oregon Trail, but using games as the actual primary tool and as a replacement for the testing process.
But what would be Bill Gates' objective in doing this? Like, why does he want to...
Well, Bill Gates has political objectives, but he also has monetary interests at stake here. If he stirs what he deems as connected learning in the gamification and education, if he spurs this revolution, he stands to make billions of profit. This is why you saw Microsoft make the outlandish buyout of Minecraft. And they did it not because they plan to make money off of normal playing of Minecraft, off of subscriptions, but because they plan to use it for Minecraft education and to create these digital worlds for the classroom.
With Bill Gates and his funding of research, one of the people in your documentary you mentioned he funded was Dana Boyd, who also works for the MacArthur Foundation. This Dana Boyd is one of the academics that researches into using games for propaganda. And she works for the MacArthur Foundation, which is another one of the groups that are pushing for games to be used for education. But they have a different objective, maybe, to Bill Gates. Their objective is more overtly political.
Dana Boyd's an interesting individual because she's a principal researcher at Microsoft Research, which is one of their most distinguished positions. I mean, that's pretty much as high up as you can get in the Microsoft Research food chain. But she also is employed by the MacArthur Foundation, and she's worked on a few books with Mimi Ito, and she received her dissertation under the guidance of Mimi Ito, which is the head researcher at the MacArthur Foundation. So their relationship is really tight, and they share the same objectives. And when you look at that Dana Boyd, at the speeches she gives, she talks about democratizing technology, and she wants to use technology to engage people politically. And she thinks if you use a 1-2 approach of using technology to connect people as well as bombarding them with political propaganda at the same time, that they'll be incited into action in a way that they could control with their subversive propaganda, which is where you see individuals like Jonathan McIntosh come into play.
Before we mention him, all of these people work for the MacArthur Foundation. I guess, can we touch on, the MacArthur Foundation's motivations in doing this?
Yeah, MacArthur Foundations are, well, they're true political radicals. They're like Dana Boyd in believing that they could use technology in storytelling and what they call user-generated content to create this generation of youth that's creating content, that's creating political remix videos to really be in your face on social media about creating social change. And this is basically the root of the social justice warrior movement, about where you're seeing all this user-generated content on Tumblr and this political, it's politically oriented in nature. And that's exactly what they intended to do with all these programs like U Media.
Right. Well, and maybe Fem Frequency, that's run by McIntosh. That
exactly. Jonathan McIntosh, the writer and the producer for Feminist Frequency, and we've shown in the documentary there's video evidence and all these interviews that he's done in the past where he's been the media curator for the MacArthur Foundation, and he's been paid by them to be basically their propaganda remix artist. He's basically their top YouTube remixer, which was also proven to be an integral role of what the digital media learning hub at MacArthur is trying to use. And it's even something that's been talked about by the Obama administration themselves.
So this McIntosh character, who is working for the MacArthur Institute, who's one of the people that runs Feminist Frequency. The ideology that he's pushing is basically that heterosexual masculine males, white males, should be a thing of the past, and everything is sexist, and everything is wrong except for the games that he deems okay. And he does this by basically employing a face of a woman to do all the talking for him. Her name is Anita Sarkeesian, and Time magazine actually named her one of the most 100 influential people in the world, you told me about earlier, which is intriguing because most people would have never even heard of her, and all she's pushing is how Super Mario is really sexist because the princess has to be saved. So why should this woman be so influential when...
That's an interesting topic, because it turns out that she actually had like the lowest votes on the whole website, but she was still given that distinction, and and that was a
On the
bit
time
controversial at the time because
the
nobody
Times
even wanted
Magazine
her.
website.
Yeah, nobody wanted to vote her into the top 100, but they still put her there because that's part of this agenda that's being pushed is, and it was spoken about in their own reports in the 2011 National Academies report, where they talked about how they want to push these judges, these industry, these people who are in charge of industry critique, and they want to judge games not on how fun they are, but on their pedagogical values is the term that they use, and that means that their educational properties as opposed to whether or not it's fun. They want to judge the games based on how much you learn from it, and by learning, I'm not talking about just hard sciences or 2 + 2 = 4. I'm talking about civic engagement and identity correction is the term that Mimi Ito used to describe Jonathan McIntosh's specialty. She says that he's a specialist at identity correction. I mean, just think of the ominous content of that phrase.
Indeed. Basically, that is what they're talking about when it comes to education. It's brainwashing. And one of the things I talked about in my previous videos is how television and movies are pretty much already quite controlled by these cultural Marxists. Femme Frequency and McIntosh and definitely the MacArthur Foundation are pushing the cultural Marxist doctrine. If you were to watch even Netflix, for example, 2 shows that have been promoted as produced by Netflix, both of them have very strong cultural Marxist themes. I mean, although the minority of people might be homosexual, for example, you cannot have a successful show in their industry unless you have the minorities represented. And it's not just so much that there are characters that are homosexual, which is fine, but also it has to be intrinsic to the storyline as well. Sometimes it has to have a central theme that is homosexuality.
Saul and I are in love.
Excuse me?
You're gay.
We want to get married.
Oh.
Married!
Mom, we're gonna find you people to talk to. People who understand exactly what you're going through. There's a group for wives of husbands who've turned gay in their 70s.
You were a lesbian at the time.
Come with me.
And that just goes to show that the amount of control that there is with the stories, that are coming out these days, that nothing can make it in the arts unless it's pushing cultural Marxism.
There's a concerted effort to focus on identity politics rather than other issues because it's a form of political subversion to do that, because when you're focusing on the identity politics, you're not focusing on other issues, and they could play with your emotions to get you aggravated over illusory just things that don't matter. Then they could get you all worked up and engaged about those and distracted from the things that actually matter.
Well, that's how they intend to get Hillary Clinton into power, because they want to push identity politics. You have to vote for a woman. We never had a female president. It doesn't matter that she's a Clinton, and Clintons have been in power for a very long time in the US.
Well, and see, and the big push, the big left push for identity politics to be the focus started about in 2004, and that's basically talked about in the documentary when you see the Vox and Polygon founders coming and speaking to Microsoft Research and talking about how they basically held a coup of the Democratic Party and decided that there wasn't a brand, and that they decided to use identity politics to create new voting Democrats through their propaganda, through the media enterprises that had these huge political ties, and they were advisors to the Dean campaign, and they had this like millions, and like I think $70 million in venture capitalist funding to back them up by these same people that are funding educational reform.
Yeah.
These are the guys that founded The Verge, Tech News, and Polygon,
Aren't
Gaming
these the
News,
same
as
people
well
that
as the
said
Daily
that
Kos.
declared gamers are dead?
Well, there were 14, I believe, 14 Polygon writers and editors that were on that Games Journal Pro list. There were more Polygon members than any other organization on that Games Journal Pro list, I believe.
So, and again, these people that set up Vox, set up Polygon, they're just mouthpieces for the big industries, and venture capitalists are backing them, which, we discussed earlier. But there's just so much evidence, and your documentary does a good job of condensing it, because I want people to go ahead and start watching it now, and not just this interview. I will try to keep it short, but is there anything else you'd like to say to people? Anything you'd like at all to mention?
I'd just like to say that the focus of the documentary isn't exactly the documentary itself. It included is a 32 gigabyte torrent file, which is what we call a data dump, and it's all these files and videos and books and PDFs and website archives of all this evidence that not only proves everything that I'm trying to say in the documentary, but there's a bunch of other things that I don't go into, and there's a bunch of evidence that I haven't even had a chance to go over, because I'm only just one person, and with the documentary itself, it's like I don't know how to make a documentary. I'm just an average Joe, so it's the presentation might not be perfect, but I was just doing the best I could. These are just findings that I found with, I was working together with SEAL Team 6. So, we were all working together and found all these revelations, and I was just trying to put it together. But I highly suggest that everyone goes through and actually digs through the evidence for yourself, and I guarantee you'll find a lot of things that I missed.
And SEAL Team 6 are the group of diggers or researchers that helped to gather the information behind that documentary. So I'd like to give them all a shout out as well, as you have just now. And the presentation, is actually pretty exciting. So I think you did a good job with that. Thank you again for the information you provided and for coming on my channel to discuss it.
Yeah, it's been great working with you.
You too. Okay, subscribe everyone to Seattle for Truth, and thank you for listening. Bye.